Since at least 2019, Mikyx has been considered unanimously to be the best support in EU. Now that is 7 years. Most players are only considered great for 1 to 2 years max. And Mickey, in just those 7 years, has won 11 LEC championships while being a part of the 2 most dominant G2 rosters ever, G2 2019 and G2 2024. He also has won the LEC MVP award for the entire year of 2023, which is impressive because this is 1 out of 21 MVPs ever awarded by the LEC, and it's the one, how do I say this? It is the one other time that a support has ever won the award, separate from Yellow Star back in summer of 2015. And Yellow Star also was a former AD carry. So I think it's pretty cool that Mickey was the sole support to do it, right? The last thing, this is for the entire year of 2023 and not just one split like all the years before it. So it's impressive to be dominant the entire year as a support and not just for one short split. Finally, when Mickey goes to international events, people have him in the same conversation with supports, world-class supports, like On and Keria, with most notably Kadrill here in 2024 putting Mickey as his 5th best support in the world at the tournament, which is pretty insane. And so today, Mickey is still considered the undisputed #1 support in EU coming into the 2026 season, and yet, despite still being considered the best and most desirable player in his role, and shout outs to, I never know what to call this guy, Poro, that's at least what I call him. Poro, who covers LoL Esports, in his ranking considers Mickey at least top 2 in the region, and he only moved him down to top 2 because Busio has been added to KC, right? The #1 support from the LCS, right? North America. So otherwise, Mickey is the undisputed #1 in Europe still in terms of who was there just last year, which is insane. And so, if we have this amazing, most desirable player, you would think that every team would be throwing themselves at the opportunity to secure him after Fnatic, probably behind the scenes, quickly revealed that Mickey was going to be let go. Since, not to get too ahead of myself, but it seemed like Mickey was also pretty eager to get out as well. And yet, for the last 2 years in a row, at the end of the season, Mickey has been kicked off of his team. And the rumors seem to suggest that it was not his gameplay that was the issue, but rather surprising accusations of attitude problems, or should I say, unprofessionalism. All right, and we'll get back into that in just a bit. So, this last departure from Fnatic was easily the more controversial and confusing and risky one, to say the least, because Mickey isn't joining a top 4 team like other years in the past, right? Going from G2 to a Fnatic. He's not even joining a middle of the pack team. He's joining the absolute worst team coming into 2026, a team that for all 3 splits in 2025 tied for last place, SK Gaming. All right? Winter 9th, Spring 9th, and LEC Summer 2025 was a little weird with 2 groups, but it was 5th place in their group, right? Literally dead last. And these 2 years, by the way, it's complete bullshit, man. 1 and 8, they were tied with Rogue. 2 and 7, they were tied with Rogue. I don't know. I get too crazy about it and just want to make sure I'm covering all my bases here. They were the worst. All right? And now, on top of the fact that it's already the worst org, he is also assembling a ragtag team of rejects and misfits, all just to seemingly prove the doubters wrong, and it feels like a fucking joke. Like, it literally feels like Mickey has lost his mind. And to me, this move feels like it's either going to be the death sentence of Mickey's career, and we are never going to see him on a top team ever again, or there is a small small, and I'm looking for all my gamblers in chat right now, very small chance that Mickey is about to bet on himself. The biggest, wildest example of a player betting on himself. And so now we have to ask in this video, will this year, 2026, be the story of Mickey's heroic rebellion against Fnatic, right? Getting his comeuppance? Or is his hubris and this unprofessionalism and toxicity that seemingly got him kicked from his last two teams finally catching up with him now that SK is giving his hubris the room to breathe, right? Is this all going to blow up in Mickey's face? That's what we're here to find out. So, allow me, and if I had editors, I would do some cute graphics here, but I didn't take the time to do it right now. I would like to take us to part one with Mikyx. So, despite everything that I mentioned about Mickey at the beginning, about his accolades and accomplishments, there are still those out there that are really sour on Mickey, particularly because of his shitty year with Fnatic. A lot of these guys are calling him overrated, as you saw in the Reddit comments just a second ago. Really not happy with his unprofessionalism, his seeming unprofessionalism. And I think, in addition to just 2025 Fnatic, I think we can also look back at his turbulent history these last few years, with 3 out of the last 4 departures for Mickey being kicks. And we're going to go through them one by one right now, because I think there's more to the story. So let's start with G2 2021, right? And that's this kick right here. So Mickey has since clarified in 2 separate interviews, one with Don Jake more recently, which really that was him saying it again. But for the first time, it was in this appearance on the Sackdown. And I got any Sackdown fans out there, this was his first of the 2 appearances he had. So this was just after he departs from G2. I don't even know if it was official yet that he got signed to Fnatic, but that could be the case for all I know. Bottom line is, his departure from G2 in 2021 was more so because Mickey, along with the other long-standing members of G2, like Wonder and Grabs, for example, they were uncertain coming into the year if they wanted to continue with G2. And as you can see here, Mickey mentions that contract negotiations, G2 was trying to initiate them at the start of 2021, right? And in part because of the inconsistent performances that G2 probably found as early as spring and definitely in summer, Mickey, Wonder, and Grabs declined to negotiate to extend at that time, right? Because there was a lot of insecurity. And so G2 decided to remove them because they wouldn't extend. And so on paper, it looked like a kick. But it's important to recognize that everyone on the team was signed to continue with the team until at least 2022. And oh gosh, please bear with me for a second. LEC contract database archives. Shit, so I was trying to prep you guys with all of these things before this. Let me see. How do I do this? I know I pulled it up before. Oh, man. Okay, you know what? Fuck it. I mean, I'm leaving it in. So just know I literally looked it up, and I might even have a screenshot, but I'm not going to do it now, that they were literally signed. Every single member was at least supposed to go to 2022, right? And that's important to recognize because they were all supposed to stay. So I don't think it's a performance-related issue. It seems directly correlated to the fact that G2 or these players did not decide to extend or even negotiate contract extensions with G2, right? So it seems pretty clear. And again, he covered that in 2 separate interviews. So although I can see the argument from both sides when it comes to this initial G2 Mickey breakup, it seems more like Mickey was aware that not extending meant he would be removed. And I think it's fair to say that that means it was Mickey's decision more than it was G2's. And thus he wasn't kicked. At best, it was mutual, and I would argue that if you take away G2's leverage in contract situations, which is just natural, orgs are always going to have more leverage until you're a free agent, Mickey was deciding to leave, not the other way around. And there's evidence to point to that later on. Hopefully I remember to bring that up. The last thing I'm going to say, I don't know, I just wrote it in my script. It's like if your girlfriend's giving you an ultimatum, she's not deciding to break up with you, she's making you decide, right? So G2 is making Mickey decide in that case. All right. So moving on to G2 2024 in this case. So here, Mikyx straight up admits that he was undeniably kicked from G2, right? Even this part in the Don Jake thing says getting kicked from G2. So this one's pretty undeniable. But according to Yankos, in a co-stream of MSI 2025, right, he leaks that from what he heard, right, my understanding is that none of the players had any say in how Yike and Mikyx, he says it in just a second, got kicked from the team at the end of the year, right? Meaning BB, Caps, and Hans, who stayed for G2 2025, were not a part of the roster decisions. And that falls in line with 3 pieces of evidence that I have, or that we have as spectators, right? The first being that it was likely not gameplay related issues that got Mikyx kicked, from G2 in 2024. Again, content creators like Kadril, do I have it here? Yeah. Content creators like Kadril and Yamato Cannon were putting Mikyx in their top 5 supports at the tournament, right? And part of that does come from his legacy or high reputation, right? Because I do remember that near the end of 2024, Mikyx's skill did take a small dip. That's we can admit that. But by the end of the year, I particularly remember at the end of season finals, he really stepped up his game. So it seemed like Mikyx and all of G2 to an extent were ramping up into Worlds 2024. So I think that's why it gave a lot of people confidence that Mikyx had that peak and that he was on the trajectory to get back to it, right? And Yankos, right, to go back to this MSI co-stream, he's literally bringing it up during this co-stream because at this MSI, as you can see, as G2 is going up against FlyQuest, they're getting 3-0'd. And this is clearly so much worse than G2 from 2024, who, I think I might have this elsewhere in the script, but as a reminder, in MSI 2024, they 3-0'd Top Esports, and they fucking took, I don't know if I should curse, they took T1 to 5 games, right? And by the way, at Worlds this year, they freaking got 3-0'd by Top Esports, and Top Esports didn't even look that good. It's insane. All right, you get the idea. So, basically, I don't think we can say that it was gameplay related. I think Mikyx was actually one of the stronger parts of G2 2024. I don't think he was the culprit, right? And I think he kind of got scapegoated. I think that's messed up. All right. 2. There's the second part of the 3 points of evidence towards Mikyx's departure. Mikyx seemed to have great relationships with every player on the team. So, although some of the following evidence is mainly from Mikyx's POV, which is obviously going to be biased to some extent, this all comes from after 2024, which I think is really important because it shows a lack of bitterness regarding the teammates and even G2 to an extent. I mean, granted, I think he might have a little bit of bitterness with G2, but he doesn't talk about it much. All right, so in the Don Jake interview, I think it's around this time. Yeah, it is around this time because here is where he starts talking about how around this time, the other players and coaching staff were kind of making it evident that Mikyx was going to get kicked. So I'm going to read from my script here. Mikyx said that BB is a great leader and that at Worlds 2024, when it was clear to those staying on G2 that Mikyx was on the outs and their behavior started to change, BB was one of the only people still trying with Mikyx, right? Calling out his mistakes, calling him out in reviews, and calling him out in scrims and holding him accountable. These are things the other players and coaches, according to Mikyx, stopped doing at this time. B, Mikyx acknowledged, Mikyx, despite acknowledging in interviews that Yike had some shortcomings, and I know I have a duplicate here. It's probably here. Yeah. Despite the fact that he has acknowledged that Yike did have some shortcomings, which we'll talk about later, he also mentioned that Yike, am I reading this right? He also still spoke highly of his skills and versatility, right? Here he says, Yike could play whatever champion we needed him to play, which not every jungler can do. And he also speaks to how much Yike improved over the 2 years of working together, right? I have much more to say about Yike when we get to Mikyx's time with Fnatic and working with Razork. So for now, we'll just say good sign and we'll talk about it more later. All right. C, it is well known that Mikyx and Caps are good friends, even outside of the game, with during the John Jake interview, Mikyx saying that Caps is one of the few players that he's worked with before that he still, talks to, after being not on the same team anymore, right? Which is pretty rare, right? It's not super common among former teammates. And one of my favorite parts about Mikyx and Caps is this friendship, which is super fucking cool, and their shared love of League that is almost unmatched compared to the other pros, right? These are guys that love Arcane, love the lore. Anytime you put these guys on an LEC quiz, they always nail it. They just really love the game, and I'm sure they have a shared camaraderie around that mutual love. And sorry, I just want to pause for a second just to mention this because we're deep enough into the video. I'm sure, I'm probably not going to lose retention for what I'm about to say. Just super quick, I'm on a MacBook and I wanted to actually play clips from these YouTube videos, but I didn't because MacBooks, I have to download a whole separate software, and I figured by the time I need to do all that for these videos, I'll probably get an editor to just splice in those cuts for us. And these videos with better views will get better, right? I just need to see some views as a proof of concept. So if you're liking the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Because we're going to be posting a lot to this channel, right? Woo! Let's go. All right. So, D, finally, Hans Sama. Right, so we're talking about all the former G2 teammates and why they most likely were not the culprits, or exactly, Yenko said it himself, right? They didn't want him to go. So finally, Hans, although there isn't a lot of modern data to speak to how Hans is currently feeling about Mikyx, right? It could theoretically be that, they stopped liking working with each other after 2 years, right? They got tired of each other. But it's important to remember that in 2023, which actually, where do I have it? Hold up. Maybe here? In 2023, G2 wasn't originally going to sign Mikyx, right? They were actually going to stick with Targamas, and he was only brought in because Hans Sama specifically requested him, right? And yeah, some folks said it was Hans that got him kicked, but I doubt it. They dominated the region. So whose genius move was it to kick Mikyx? We don't necessarily know. And then the third piece of evidence that I want to suggest that kind of speaks to the fact that, the G2 decision to kick Mikyx was not an educated one, right? It was made, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think it was just made by detached management, is that to this day, and again, last time I'm going to probably reference this, or maybe not, in this Don Jake interview, Mikyx speaks a lot and speaks incredibly highly of the last G2 iteration, right? The 2024 one. Saying that he felt if not for the rumors of him and Yike potentially being on the outs, right, which messed with their heads and probably Caps, BB, and Hans's heads, even if they thought they were staying. And it's not even to mention that Hans had accusations of him getting kicked, right? Because I don't know if you guys know, there was that rumor that they were trying to do a massive trade of Romain, Hans, and more, all for Kalist, right? Which that doesn't feel good. Basically, Mikyx was saying, if not for all that stupid bullshit, and the other members and coaches not giving up on the already kicked players, he believes that G2 2024 had what it takes to win Worlds that year, which breaks my fucking heart because I love that roster. That was an awesome roster. So along with what I said about BB still trying, it also seems that Mikyx was still trying. In that interview, or in this exact interview, when Don Jake also talks about Worlds 2023, Mikyx was able to pull up his notes about that tournament within seconds. And he spoke about the ideas and champion picks he was pushing in that World tournament and in Worlds 2024. And that's actually the more important one, right? He was talking about wanting to pick Tarek and other off-meta shit, right? Because he thought it would be really good. And that the team stopped acknowledging or his ideas or attempting any of them because I guess it's presumed that he was already on the outs, right? So why are we going to try this crazy shit? Why don't we just try a more traditional style that's going to be way easier to replace, you know what I'm saying? They're developing a more normal style since they know a more normal support's coming in next year. So Mikyx clearly wasn't checked out of Worlds 2024. And granted, it's his bias, but still, I don't think he was checked out. I don't think he was uncaring during these events. Mickey's effort clearly... What the hell? My screensaver. Mickey's effort clearly wasn't the problem. So although we don't have as much perspective from the other members of G2 2024, it just doesn't seem like it was Mickey's gameplay. his working relationship with his teammates, or his effort, especially at the end of the year, that led to the decision to remove him. And quickly, I know this is some of this stuff now that I look at it, I'm like, maybe it's pretty obvious, but to bring it back to this Jankos clip for a second, based on how he's saying it, why he's saying it at this tournament, and on how Sneaky and Doublelift are reacting to it, they said it best. It's just dumb not to factor in your players' opinions when it comes to roster changes, right? So although Mikyx was undoubtedly kicked from G2 2024, I personally, I think I already said this already, I don't put that much weight behind this move, and I don't think you should either. It was likely detached management making a less educated decision than actually listening to the players who would know what is best for the team. Just my opinion, right? And so, although I say this is probably the most definitive kick, already we're 2 for 2, right? I don't think these kicks were legit. One on a technicality, one on a completely legitimate, that being the 2021. I'm talking too much. That brings us to our last, most controversial kick. I don't know if I have it here. I don't actually have it up, but anyway. Fnatic in 2025. So, quick refresher about Fnatic from last year. After their disappointing loss in spring 2025, head coach Grabs did a Fnatic fan conference. It's a thing that he does on his Twitch channel. And in it, he mentions that the 2024 members of Fnatic, so Oscar, Razork, and Humanoid, had problems with morale, motivation, and attitude, and that there would be changes. But notably, Grabs said that Mikyx and Upset were not a part of the problem, and that they would not be in jeopardy of being removed. But I think it is worth mentioning that Grabs highlighted Upset as always coming in with a good attitude and always looking for solutions, but didn't necessarily highlight Mikyx in the same way. And likely Grabs is biased towards Mikyx since, I actually didn't think about this, I'm mentioning this now. Grabs is likely biased towards Mikyx since they have the previous relationship of working together on G2 from 2019 to 2021. So you would think that even if Mikyx was a little bit remarkable in terms of motivation and attitude, Grabs would highlight it the same way he's highlighting Upset, but he didn't. And I think we'll touch on this in a bit. Okay, so as the story goes, when Fnatic settled on kicking Humanoid, Mikyx requested a specific mid laner to replace him, Leader. Which, actually, I'll just pull up a quick photo in case, because Leader's not the most popular player in the world. This is Leader, right? I'll even pull it up here. So, this is the guy that Mikyx requested. And it was kind of crazy. If you really have some old heads in the chat, he's wearing an Astralis jersey, right? And they end up selling their spot to KC, I think in its entirety. So, it's not even like Astralis was a terrible org. And he was on it. So it's not a great reflection that you want this player to join. Anyway, as we all know, Fnatic would not sign Leader and would instead sign T1 Academy's Poby. And apparently Mikyx, and this part's really a lot of hearsay, but whether through frustration or, as I mentioned before, childish unprofessionalism, he was rumored to have been completely checked out from that point on for the remainder of the year. And considering Fnatic had an abysmal end to summer, right? And an especially terrible appearance at Worlds, where literally every single player in every single interview was beyond pessimistic, talking about that there was needed really deep changes. It's not surprising to hear that Mikyx was also not cooperating. So clearly, almost nothing at Fnatic was working as it should be. So although the story of Mikyx checking out after hearing that this Leader request was denied or otherwise ignored, it's more, that would be more hearsay than concrete evidence, right? So it's pretty much confirmed that he requested Leader, but is it confirmed that he's checked out of Fnatic? That's more up in the air. Until we get to the smoking gun here, which is this Twitter scandal. So this kind of all but confirms Mikyx's feelings towards Fnatic at the time. I think it's here. Yes. Okay. So during Worlds, Mikyx, from his personal Twitter account, liked a tweet that said, "It must be a shocking experience to play for Fnatic after coming from a serious org like G2." And apparently, according to commenters on Reddit, I believe it's like right here. Where is it? Oh man, I really would like to see. Okay, I saw the comment, but okay. Anyway, we'll look at it later. But according to the commenters on Reddit, Mickey had been liking to. Oh, I think it's at the top. No. Yeah. Literally after winter, all of his posts and especially interviews have been like this. He never believed in this roster, and 100%. He has zero motivation to play. It's so obvious, by the way. Obviously, it sucks. I love him, and he's the GOAT support player. But it's probably just better to let him go if he doesn't want to stay. All right, Ben. There you go. So basically, they're insinuating that Mickey has been liking tweets and kind of expressing this lack of motivation since as early as the end of winter 2025. And this is in line with the idea that Mickey has a history of being And this is in line with the idea that although Mickey has a history of being a proactive and motivated member of his previous teams, Grabs did not highlight this kind of professionalism and motivation in his Fnatic fan conference in spring because Mickey was likely already pulling back and giving up on the org and roster to an extent by that point, right? And I think the leader... them ignoring the leader request was probably just the nail in the coffin, the straw that broke the camel's back. So shortly after Worlds, and I believe, I don't want to pull it up, but I just want to let you know, someone even mentioned how alarmingly early it was to announce this, because I don't even think it was in November. It was quickly announced after Fnatic's loss at Worlds that Mickey would be mutually parting ways with the org. But many fans were understandably disappointed at the rumored unprofessionalism and attitude coming from Mickey. And to bring it back to what I said at the beginning, I don't know why this brings it back to what I said at the beginning, but anyway, how good or bad a player's removal is seen by fans and others is in part by where they go next, right? So, getting removed from one team might seem bad at first, but if you go to a better team, it actually could be considered like, oh shit, like the player's actually, it's not the player, it's the org. You'll see what I mean in a second. So players like Adam and Bwipo have lost opportunities to go to high-tier orgs despite being, I know Adam's more controversial, but Bwipo's undeniably a very good top laner, a very desirable one gameplay-wise. But they have both suffered, and not been able to join top teams because of personal or behind-the-scenes controversies, right? Bwipo with his fucking period accounts, which is a conversation for another day, and Adam with, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in 2023 or 2024, actually, it was 2024, Adam got benched just before like a losers finals match because of like rumored talking back to the coach, right? To Striker on BDS. So those things have kind of hurt their career. And I think Adam also like went on like a Twitter spree being like, yo, I'm so much better than this. Why am I not getting top offers? And people were like, yeah, dude, because you're kind of a dick behind the scenes, or you at least have that reputation. Okay, on top of that, Perks, Jankos, Wonder, and Mickey were all prevented or otherwise disincentivized through massive buyouts by G2 from going to other top orgs because G2 recognized that they'd be dangerous competitors. So most famously, I feel like weird if you guys are just looking at this. I'm going to pull up that picture of Mickey again. Hi. All right, cool. So let me see. Actually, one sec real quick. Perfect. Okay, so Perks was not allowed to go to Fnatic, even though that was his first choice when he wanted to depart from G2 in 2020, and Carlos completely blocked it because he knew that Perks was great and he didn't want to have to compete with him and give such an advantage to his literal number one competitors. Jankos had a huge buyout put on him that prevented him to go to any team, and he ended up only going to Heretics, which had a horrible roster, and I still think Heretics had to pay like an $800,000 buyout. I could be wrong about that, but I think they had to pay a buyout. I just don't know how much it was. Wonder had a buyout at first, but then eventually, which I'm like, then if they gave him to Fnatic, why? But they eventually gave him to Fnatic, and Fnatic was building a super team at that time, so it's pretty cocky that G2 is like not threatened at all. And Mickey as well was also blocked because if you guys don't remember, after 2021, Mickey actually wasn't secured by a single team, and it was only like halfway through spring or a few weeks into spring regular season that Mickey was signed to XL, replacing AdVN. Okay, so you get the idea. Buyouts are usually a really good indicator that a player is considered very valuable by their team, right? And valuable by the entire LEC, right? The ecosystem. And in the case, well, I talk about Reckless. That's not important. But in the case of Mikyx was removed from Fnatic with no buyout, which seems to indicate that Fnatic was possibly not intimidated at the thought of losing Mikyx to a better team, either because they knew other teams wouldn't want him for some reason, maybe because Mikyx was starting to build this bad reputation of getting kicked from his last 2 teams, and word was getting around, right? And behind the scenes, knowledge and blind items are way different from what we know as the public. So maybe this reputation was true, right? Maybe this toxicity was true. However, maybe there was no buyout because, according to Sheep Esports, Mikyx had already indicated that he wanted to go to SK, and since SK was not a fucking threat, maybe it just made sense for Fnatic to let him go free and clear to a non-threatening team rather than jeopardize keeping him on payroll for any longer than they had to, right? So maybe it was like a mutual, like, you know what, dude? I think this works. We're happy with it, and you're going to be happy with it. So bang, bang. So this lines up what we've been told so far since, again, it was said not only, or when did I say that? Well, whatever. This lines up with what we've been told by Sheep Esports, that SK was Mikyx's first choice. But this kind of gets confusing, right? We have these 2 options. Either Mikyx is toxic and he's going to another team with no buyout because he's not desirable anymore because of a bad reputation, or no, he still is great, and this is just like him going to a new team to bet on himself, right? So it's confusing because the evidence is kind of supporting both equally opposite stories, and so I want to try and get to the bottom of what's going on in part 2, the Mikyx conspiracy. So, obviously before 2025, I felt like the 2024 removal from G2 was unjustified, right? I was super upset. In my previous video, I mean, I'll just pull it up because it's nice to look at. Actually, I won't because I don't want you guys to see my recommended on YouTube. Actually, what I could do... no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to bother. Anyway, on my previous video, I could prove it to you some other time, but I'm not going to now. I said that the Mikyx for Labrov just felt like a downgrade to me, or at best a side grade. And other creators like I Will Dominate and Yamato Cannon and stuff like that, they had said in interviews or in podcasts that likely what G2 is going to do is exactly what they did in 2021, right? They're going to kick Mikyx for a year just to realize how valuable he is and sign him a year later, and that would be the end of the story, right? And by the way, there's a little asterisk to that because originally they weren't going to re-sign him in 2023 and it was Hans Sommer's request, but maybe they would learn their lesson and then in 2026 re-sign him. It's neither here nor there. Okay, so the thing is, although that was originally the case, and I thought that G2 was going to come to their senses and sign him at the end of the year, specifically Mikyx, this last departure in 2025 genuinely, after the rumors came out and everything, gave me some pause and created some doubt in my mind, right? Maybe if Mikyx was shamelessly pulling back from trying his best in Fnatic, just because Fnatic seemingly didn't go for his specific mid lane pick, which... why does a support who's only been on the team for a year expect to have that much authority, right? Maybe that also indicates that maybe he pulled back in G2 to some extent, especially since he mentioned that there were some issues with the coaches and teammates not going for his more unique support picks, right? So maybe he pulled back in that context too, because he even says, as he pulls up those notes in the Don Jake interview, that he really wanted Caps to play Nico for some reason, but they never did it, right? So you can kind of see the case that I'm building here. Was there some bitterness or resentment that was building over time? We don't have the other players' perspectives, like I said before, so was Mikyx more difficult to work with than even he realizes, right? He's obviously biased. But let me cut to the chase. In my opinion, no. And I think there's one particular reason, and it comes down to this Fnatic departure. Because without getting into the nitty-gritty, I think the 2025 departure from Fnatic says so much more about Fnatic than it does about Mikyx, okay? Here's my conspiracy. Humanoid joined Fnatic and was never known to have motivation or effort issues, but then he joins Fnatic and seems to be checked out and ultimately gets kicked. Granted, like 3.5 years later, but you get the idea. Then Upset joins Fnatic in 2021, stays for 2 years, and then gets frustrated, refuses to play with the rookie support Rux in 2023, benches himself, which is noteworthy, right? He was tired of it, and although he's benched by Fnatic, and they kind of had the final say, it was because Upset refused to play with this support, and he knew the consequences, so he benched himself. It's like that ultimatum thing I said. And I believe it's here, or here? Yeah. So it's right here at the beginning of the Sackdown interview. Actually, no, bullshit. Am I even saying that? No. Okay, I shouldn't have even brought that up. But that's neither here nor there. Okay. Wonder in 2023 gets frustrated with Fnatic because they tried to get him to try out for his position before spring of 2023, and he benched himself. Right. He refused to play the tryouts. He knew what the consequences were. I don't need to keep repeating that. So now in 2025, Mikyx is frustrated with Fnatic, and I suspect. Well, okay. Now in 2025, Mikyx is frustrated with Fnatic. Fact. And I suspect that a certain player who has been there for each of these previously mentioned departures, oh, Mikyx is frustrated with Fnatic, and I suspect he is also frustrated with a specific player. I'll talk about that in a second, but you probably already are putting the clues together. Okay. Could it be... Sure, it could be that all these decorated LEC champions and finalists and MVPs in Upset, Humanoid, Wonder, and Mikyx, who were all respected behind the scenes. I mean, Wonder, they brought him, Fnatic wanted to bring him back. Upset, they brought him back. Humanoid, they never got rid of. His coaches like Nightshare and Upset even, and Razork, everybody always talks very highly of Humanoid. I think the fans are a little too harsh with him. That's a conversation for another day. But right? So are these LEC finalists and champions who are respected behind the scenes all just secretly toxic, bad players who suck and are unprofessional and are hurting Fnatic? Or maybe Mikyx is just the fourth or fifth example of a player suffering through Fnatic and this fucking mysterious player's toxicity, and Mikyx is just seeing the writing on the wall, seeing that there's clearly no point in trying to work with this team, that it'll clearly never work, right? And he's just checking out earlier than everybody else, right? And I mean, I'm basically saying, yeah, that is my understanding of the situation, right? Because my main culprit, I am going to pull this one up, is Razork, okay? And I'm going to try to hold myself accountable and not just go like insane in the membrane on just talking shit about Razork, right? How do I like pull this in another tab? I want to look at his big face. Open link in another tab, open image in another tab. Bada bing, bada boom, look at that. Bang, 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 bang. And this picture is low quality. Awesome. Okay. So my main corporate is Razork. Razork has been on the team since, for all of these iterations, when players left. Again, to keep it very simple, Razork seems to struggle to play for other carries. It is no secret that Razork's biggest strength is as a carry jungler, okay? And so, when Razork and Humanoid first united, right, there were already immediately conversations about how they were not synergizing well. And I think it's because Razork wasn't as natural at sacrificing his resources to get Humanoid ahead. Same thing with Upset. Upset's a player that wants everyone to play for him and sacrifice their resources. Humanoid is supposedly a very caring player, according to interviews with his former coaches, and he's a macro god who would supposedly sit with his teammates if they were willing to learn, but quickly got frustrated if his teammates didn't show the same willingness to learn or to be taught. And to me, that sounds a lot like Razork wasn't willing to change and that Humanoid gave up. And I say that because I think that's a little controversial to say, because I think a lot of people just blame Humanoid, say he's a paycheck stealer. Again, conversation for another day to go more in depth on, and I have a lot of supporting evidence, but let's go back to what I said about Mikyx with Mikyx. So Mikyx had a similar jungler, and for that matter, a similar AD carry in Mikyx and Hans. Because Mikyx is known for his carry jungling, right? And Hans is an ADC that wants to stomp lane and wants his jungler to play for his role and his lane so that he can get ahead and carry games. And Mikyx is a jungler who Mikyx said is amazing at playing for himself, but isn't as strong at sacrificing his resources to get his carries ahead, right? Just trying to check that I'm not doxing myself. Okay, cool. So Mikyx said that he actually had to compensate by doing some of the jungler's job so that Yike could focus on carrying, at least at the start of 2023. Pressuring lanes, fixing late wave states, helping a scaling mid get push, you name it, right? A lot of those things were done by Mikyx so that Yike could just full clear, and gank. And finally, he said that Yike obviously got better over time and that he's a talented and versatile jungler, right? So you would think that plugging in a support like Mikyx to Fnatic would be Razork's wet dream come true, but it didn't work for some reason. You would think that Mikyx, with all his macro knowledge, could teach Razork, but clearly something broke Mikyx and removed his motivation. Mikyx said Mikyx in interviews clearly was enthusiastic about his lane and has nothing but good things to say about working with Upset, but has always seemed to insinuate that the top side of the map, Oscar, Razork, and Humanoid, just couldn't get it together. A lot of people exclusively throw Humanoid under the bus for this, but what about Razork? They literally joined at the exact same time. And when Humanoid left, you would think that the problem would be solved or improved because supposedly the main culprit was gone. And even if you argue that, okay, well, Razork was having these motivation issues because Humanoid's on the team, and basically Humanoid started it, so Razork was just like a secondary effect, right? But the real core problem was Humanoid. But now if you get Humanoid gone, seemingly Razork's motivation should have been at an all-time high, but in fact, the problem got worse. And who is there left to blame? Oscar? What does a support player care about a top laner when it comes to macro and motivation, right? A top laner is very fucking isolated, right? So this is getting into the territory of my next video about Fnatic, so I'll hold. Surprisingly, I have more thoughts about this. For now, I think everything that I've said is all we need to make this point. The bottom line is it a little unprofessional that Mikyx stopped trying? Yes, but if 5 completely separate players, I did the Trump there, 5 completely separate players go into a bar and all come out with black eyes, it would take an insane level of mental gymnastics to victim blame all 5 of them. If the 6th guy decides to leave the bar early, especially when his opinion isn't even being taken into consideration at the bar, because his analogy's falling apart, he's not an asshole, he's smart. He doesn't want to get a black eye, or at least go into the bar again for another year and get another black eye. But what about him going to SK Gaming? Well, SK, I think it's here. Where are you? There it is. Okay. One way to view Mikyx going to, this is part 3. Part 3, SK Gaming. One way to view Mikyx going to SK is that it's the end of his career. I am pretty sure that SK is not an org that pays a lot. I don't know if you guys know with the franchising system, not to get too into the nitty gritty, but the LEC or Riot, what have you, pays each team, gives each team a portion of money to pay salaries. And a strategy for lower tiered teams is to get really cheap players so that ideally you save money, right? Or you make money off of that lump sum. So let's say you get 500K from Riot, but then you only pay 300K in salaries. Bang, you just have a 200K net profit, right? So they don't seem, right? SK is always in last place. Even at their best, they get like 5th, 6th, tops, usually 7th, 8th. It just doesn't seem like their goal is to win the LEC. And we have seen many great players like Mikyx go to worse teams and their level decreases. And guys that were once legends fall down to barely average, if not outright mediocre. Perks after G2, I mean, completely, right? Goes to Cloud9, doesn't look like a great mid laner, not even the best mid laner in NA, only wins 1 of 3 trophies, I think, or 2 of 3 trophies to be fair. Does kind of shit at internationals, at MSI. They don't even make top 4. It's not a good look. And then obviously he comes to the LEC. I'm going into way more detail. I literally wrote my script to be concise, and I'm not being concise. even Reckless after G2, Reckless was like an MVP in 2021, goes to KC and just like goes to KC, does shit, then comes back to the LEC, looks terrible, like completely loses his form. Yankos, when he went to Heretics, good at first, but then eventually just keeps trickling down until he just couldn't do it anymore. And that's why Mikyx going to SK is a huge risk that has me nervous. Now, it seems like SK was Mikyx's first choice though, mainly because it seems that they are giving Mikyx the opportunity to GM basically, make all the roster decisions. And this is risky though, right? And that's, I want to point that out, right? Because we've seen rosters like, hopefully this pulls up quick, Vitality 2022 LEC. Let's see if they pull up the fucking thing here. Okay, so in 2022, Perkz and Alphari wanted to work together, right? Both coming from NA, C9 for Perkz and TL, Team Liquid for Alphari. They wanted to build a team together and around the two of them as the centers of it, and it went horribly, horribly wrong, right? This Vitality roster was supposed to be a super team. They did shit in spring. They got 6th place. They didn't even make playoffs in summer, despite having Haru, who I think is like literally a world champion. It's ridiculous. To me, it's complete narcissism and ego from the side of Perkz and Alphari. That they both had rumors of toxicity to the point where Alphari got benched for behavioral issues in 2021, and yet Perkz thought that everyone else was crazy and that the two of them were above the criticism. It's ridiculous. So there is a possibility that Mikyx and Leader could be another example of two players thinking that they know best and that they're not listening to what could be likely legitimate outside criticism, and this could all blow up in their face, right? That is my big concern with these two. I believe that's Leader. He looks a little different now. And then obviously there's Mikyx. Okay, sorry. The other thing is, I don't know much about L9, and it's so old at this point. I think by the time I started watching League in like 2020 or 2021, I think L9 was already like, near the end of their tenure. But I think it was like a gamer group, and Leader was a part of it, and they were like notoriously toxic, right? So you have Mikyx as the mastermind, like Perkz was, right? And Leader as the Alphari, the toxic powerhouse. And the remaining spots are like whatever, right? Very similar breakdown to Vitality 2022 minus the hype. I don't think people are really hyping up SK like they were Vitality. So for what it's worth though, and this goes back to, I forgot why I brought this up, but I think maybe I'll jog my memory in a second. For what it's worth, hopefully it's here. Where are you? It's a Sheep Esports article. It's probably here. Okay, for what it's worth, at the end of 2021, Mikyx and Leader were just about to join C9 together, marking several years of trying to be on the same team. So obviously this wasn't like, Mikyx, I should just read my script. For what it's worth, Mikyx has supposedly been trying to pair with Leader for some time. Mikyx also said on stream, I don't have the audio for this, or you guys won't have it, but in this clip, he does talk about that he thinks Leader is the best option on the market, minus maybe Jojo Pune and Caps, obviously. Even putting him ahead of names like Humanoid and Vladdy, right? Saying, which is kind of crazy, because if you guys know anything about Leader, this is a shock. He said that he thinks that Leader has a bigger champion pool than Vladdy, saying that Vladdy is only better than Leader depending on the meta, right? It all depends. Which is crazy, right? That's just a very interesting thing to hear, right? You wouldn't expect that. Leader seems to be at his best, though, when he plays melee mid laners, which is a unique play style that requires the entire team to play around that play style. And to play differently, right? Outside of how they traditionally would. And without getting too ahead of myself, that's going to be unlikely, in my opinion, when Mikyx and Leader are playing with a lower-end jungler and rookie AD carry, right? So they're playing with jungler Skeens, who actually played in the LEC back in 2020. He played with Cabochard and Saken, who were on KC in 2024. And I highlight that because it goes to show that despite the fact that Skeens was decent in the ERLs, and he wasn't even as dominant in the ERLs as Sakin and Kabashard were, that doesn't translate to success in the LEC, right? It's a different level. So my point is, I do think Skeens, unfortunately, is probably a lower end jungler. And then they have this rookie AD carry. And so for me, I think that you need a special type of unique jungler, not just some random guy. And same thing with the AD carry, to play around Leader's playstyle, in my opinion. And also with Fearless, right? Fearless draft, Leader's champion pool could get exploited and taken out like never before, right? Imagine, it was hard in Astralis for Leader to get his champions, and now you're telling me in Fearless, he might get one of those champions one game in a best of 5. And I watched this great video during Worlds. I actually wish I could pull it up for you guys offhand, but I genuinely don't remember it, but I do want to credit the creator some other time, about how G2's draft strategy at this World Championship, 2020, am I crazy? Yeah, World 2025. Part of it was to intentionally pick the enemy team's favorite champions, even if it put them at risk of losing a game, just so that the enemy would not have it, right? So if they did that a few months ago, I am sure it will happen, or it will be used domestically in the LEC. All right, that's my spiel about Leader. I know I didn't come to much of a conclusion. I hope I do later on, but there's a lot of red flags here. Okay. Then they are signing Wonder. I'm not even going to bother with all this shit. I'm just going to pull up this picture. So enjoy looking at this funny ass mustachio. In my last video that I did on my main channel, please go check it out. I think it's a great video. I talk about Fnatic, and Fnatic was looking to potentially sign Wonder before summer 2025. But I make this massive argument that I think it's a pretty delusional take, right? He played the entire year with Heretics in 2024, where he looked at best like a middle of the pack top laner, right? I don't think he was better than Oscar at that time. I don't think he was better than Oscar in 2025. In 2025, Wonder was also a part of that Ruddy Sack project. And on that team, right, they placed 5th and 6th in the NCL. Like, dude, if they're placing 5th and 6th in a tier 2, and the NCL isn't even the most competitive ERL. So it's embarrassing that they got 5th, 6th. And Yankos on the Euphoria podcast, actually I realized now, oh well, I could do something, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. Hold on, let me just pull this up. I'm going to pull this over here so that I maybe can pull things up for you guys. But anyway, Yankos on the Euphoria podcast said that he had a Euphoria podcast appearance where he said that a part of why the team failed, both of them, right? Team Heretics in 2024 with Wonder, Perks, and Yankos, and the Ruddy Sack with Wonder, Perks, and Yankos, was because him, Perks, and Wonder lacked a bit of hunger and drive that they once had at their peak. And I know gaming isn't the same as traditional sports, but it still takes an exceptional talent and unique skill set to take so much time off and then get back to your peak, much less surpass that peak. And add to that League is an ever-changing game, so legacy skill does exist, but it's low-key more important about being being the best at what's best today than it is about that legacy skill, right? For what it's worth, and I like to cover my bases here. For what it's worth, Sheep Esports Wonder. We might even just get to be able to pull out the article straight from here, like I thought. Wonder has reached his highest LP peak ever in his pro career, right? Which is noteworthy, right? It is impressive, and it shows that he is probably trying harder than ever. Like, he's probably taking this SK project seriously, but it's still a tough sell for me, right? The final problem that I see, and this goes back to Perks on Vitality and their stint on Heretics, is that when you get super teams like this with veterans, at times, especially when a player like Perks was GMing basically, right? Making all these requests for who he wanted on the team. And similarly, now with Mikyx making all these requests, right? And GMing for the team, it becomes difficult for these players to be coached, right? So specifically on Heretics, I believe Peter Dunn was the coach, right? And Peter Dunn does a lot of interviews with Thorin, and he had said or referenced that Wonder, Jankos, and Perks, as multi-time LEC champions who had made deep runs internationally, didn't want to listen to how him and the other coaching staff thought the game should be played, right? They simply thought they knew better. And I think players they thought they knew better. But in my opinion, I think players underestimate how important coaching staff truly is. I have made passive comments in previous videos about lower tiered orgs like Vitality, SK, and even Fnatic at this point, seemingly being cursed, right? Because it feels like you could put Caps, Inspired, Mickey, and whoever else you want on SK or some other bottom of the barrel org, Navi, what have you. And for some reason, despite having all that power, it won't work. They won't win, right? Or at the very least, they will not be as strong as they would be if they were on G2. And I think some of the biggest factors, without getting into a whole, video essay about it, I think that it's in part coaching staff, since coaching staff typically doesn't change too much. It kind of depends on the org, but coaching staff sometimes exceeds even the longest standing player with the most longevity. I think it also has to do not just with coaches, but with the support beyond that, right? Fnatic, up until very recently, didn't have a performance coach, and that's a top org without a performance coach. So imagine orgs with less money. I imagine they don't have multiple coaches like G2 do with specific strengths and responsibilities, right? I think all Dylan Falco has to concentrate on is draft, whereas they have another coach for, when they had Duffman was focused on macro. They had another coach, they have a performance coach in Isma. They have so many coaches for specific niches, and other orgs only have literally one guy who the players likely don't respect trying to freaking do it all, right? So I do think that's a huge factor here. They probably don't have positional coaches, mental health coaches, or support and resources. Top facilities and orgs have top orgs have facilities with chefs to make sure they're even eating right. In-house gyms and stuff like that, etc., etc. So even if Mickey and Leader and Wonder all come in at their peak and magically work together, and even if Skeens and Yopa somehow actually turn out to also be amazing pickups and in top form, and maybe all 5 of these players, right? Maybe they combine to be greater than the sum of their parts, right? That is technically possible, right? But maybe not having the resources that players like Mickey and Wonder are used to may create problems or dips in performance that they are not used to. And granted, Wonder might be a little bit more used to it since Heretics didn't have it and Ruddy Sack definitely didn't have it. That was a tier 2, streamer team, but still. So I don't think there is a question that Mickey cares, right? Mickey seems to really give a shit. Wonder seems to really give a shit. Leader, if Mickey wants him to play and Mickey gives a shit, you can assume he wants to give a shit, right? I think Mickey still loves League. I think he really loves being a pro. I definitely say this later, but even Jankos, right, has said he feels like he has more to give to professional play. So these players really give a shit, right? I think he left Fnatic because he wanted to be a part of it. I think he wanted to be at least a part of, if not create his own project that he felt could actually contend for the championship. And that's saying something that he thinks this team could contend better than Fnatic could. That really is fucking crazy. It really says something. That's all I could say. But what scares me... I'm sorry. So Mickey is clearly leaving Fnatic because he wants to be a part of a project that he thinks could actually contend for the championship. I just think he might be wrong. And that scares me. Because I don't want to lose Mickey. But like I said before, this is a story I've seen before, and it leads to ERLs and retirement, right? The more we're coming up on the end here. Okay. The more I wrote about all this, the more I realized how much I love Mikyx. Let me pull his face up. Where you at, buddy? Okay. He legit feels like literally the equivalent of Caps, just in a different role, right? In support. His longevity, his world-class level, a random stat that was said at some point in LEC 2025 was that Caps, Hans, and Mikyx are the only players still in the LEC today from 2017, which is insanity. And again, like I said at the very, very beginning, it's not just about still playing, right, on a bottom tier team. It's the fact that literally up until this year, or up until this move to SK, Mikyx is literally considered the #1 support and has always been on a top org, right? So that alone is impressive, but it's even more... Oh, well, here I go repeating myself. That alone is impressive, but it's even more impressive that they are still at the top of their game. So the thought of losing Mikyx, or even just him being on a team like SK that likely won't make Worlds, just feels so shitty. And I think Mikyx lost a lot of his perceived value because he was on Heretics. But if you actually go back and watch Heretics in 2023, or was it 2023 or 2024? 2023. Mikyx wasn't washed. He was just surrounded by, no offense to anyone on the team, especially not Jack Spectra, because I actually really like him. But they were all trash, right? And even Caps on the team, like even if Caps was on a lower team like Heretics at that time, even he wouldn't be able to carry it. Look at him on 2025 G2. He can't fucking carry the team or be world class when they fucking suck, right? So Mikyx couldn't do it, right? And now because of that, Mikyx is fucking gone, right? And that's a big deal, right? Despite saying he feels more to give to competitive play, Mikyx is not on an LEC team, and the LEC is worse off because of that, right? So I don't know. I'm just scared that we are about to lose our GOAT support. Motherfucker. I'm not actually mad, but I'm a little animated. I'm just scared that we're about to lose our GOAT support the same way we lost our GOAT jungler just a year or two ago. So look, I want SK to be good entirely for the sake of Mikyx, right? Mikyx is a treasure that belongs on a top team. I think he'd be an improvement to every team except maybe KC if the hype around Busio is to be believed. I don't want to see Mikyx lose credibility or interest from top teams because of this project. That's another big fear. Or maybe that's the same fear. I don't know. I'm repeating myself. I also think that although Mikyx is a very special player, I would worry that maybe with 2 bad years back to back, and with him being one of the oldest players in the league, I just worry that he might lose some of the X factor needed to be #1 and some of that youthful fucking I play League for 12 hours until I lose the strength in my legs, right? To be world class and or get back to that peak, right? That's sometimes what you need. So the LEC legit feels weaker simply because Mikyx is not on a top team, in my opinion. And my final thought is, even if Leader and Wonder and Mikyx miraculously show up in top form, when you have a weaker jungler or AD carry that aren't at their level, how much can this team truly achieve? If I was an SK Copium guy, and I'm not, I would pray that Mikyx, Wonder, and Leader are hoping to show some proof of concept, right? Oh, I'm sorry. That they would show some proof of concept in Split 1 so that maybe in spring they could recruit upgraded jungle and AD carry, and then maybe SK actually makes it by Split 3 as a title contender. Maybe. And I doubt it, but if you're an SK fucking, I don't know who you are, maybe there's got to be like one guy out there that gives a shit about SK. There's your 1% chance copium so you don't get the shakes tonight. That's that. And that's the end of my video, guys. Seriously, this is an experiment for me, so I can't get into it too much just because I'm terrified of losing retention. But I'm Tuff Leader. I have a main channel that'll be linked in the description, so please go check that out. Much appreciated if you do. Just go check me out if this is the first time you're seeing me. Like and subscribe. If I get to it, I might make a private video, or better yet, just a post kind of explaining what's going on. But right now, the idea is quality down so that quantity way the fuck up. While also, if these can become more low effort, but we could pump these out, if they get the views that it needs, we can get some money going, we can get editors and stuff. I want this to snowball so that I can also fully concentrate more of my time back to the green screen videos. So we literally get green screen plus this, which I hope you guys enjoyed. But yeah, thank you so much. Subscribe to more videos. Sorry, patrons. I'm not going to shout you out this one. So for that, unless this video gets like a bajillion views, I'm not going to put, no, I'm going to, whatever. Maybe I won't, maybe I will put the Patreon link in the description. Actually, just go to my main channel if you want to see that shit. I have the Patreon link there. Anyway, that's that. I don't want to kill the retention anymore. I've been Tuff Leader. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm super looking forward to the LEC. Let me know what your comments in the comment section. I'm leaving it in. I don't give a fuck. Peace out.